good. Welcome to Dark Horse Auto and Diesel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove the transfer case from a 99 to 2003 Ford Super Duty. The process will be pretty much the same regardless of whether you have a manual shift or electric shift transfer case. When I reach those points where there is a little bit of a difference, I'll just tell you about the differences because mine's electric shift. This process is also going to be largely the same for pretty much about any front-engined, rear-biased four-wheel drive vehicle, but obviously for the specifics, it's going to be the Super Duties here. As you can see, I've already got my transmission jack in place here and strapped down to it. The reason I did that was just because I wanted to get all of my riggings pretty well figured out before I got started and got to the point to where I really had to do it. You will want to be safe with this. These transfer cases are kind of heavy. You can do it manually without a jack. I've done it before where you just pull it down by hand and muscle the new one back up in there, but I really don't feel like doing that today, so I'm not going to. And as far as my riggings goes, pretty simple. I just got a little chunk of 2x2 there, and you can see over here I've got not really a flat part, sort of flat part of the transfer case sitting on the jack. There you get a pretty good view of it. Just for safety there. These things are, I want to say they're about 100, 125 pounds or so. So it is possible to do it by hand, but they're also very awkward and unbalanced. This side here is going to be heavier than that side over there. It just makes it really difficult to try to get everything lined up. So I'm going to take the easy route here. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is remove the drive shafts. And before I even start with that, I'm going to go ahead and lock both front hubs. And the reason for that is to keep the front drive shaft from spinning while we're loosening up the bolts for it. Next, we're going to take out the 4 bolts that hold the drive shaft to the output flange of the transfer case. Those are going to be 12 millimeter, 12 point. You can use a socket or a wrench. Now, these tend to be pretty tight, so you're probably going to have to use some pretty good force on them. Now, before you take those 4 bolts all the way out, I'd recommend leaving them threaded in a little bit. And the reason for that is because the drive shaft usually tends to get kind of seized onto the output flange there, and you're going to need to get a pry bar or something up in there and kind of wiggle on it, or take like a dead blow hammer to the flange or something like that. Usually what I do, just give it a swift kick and it's loose. So now we can take them 4 bolts out and get the drive shaft out of the way. Now you can remove these back here from the axle. I'm not going to because they usually round off every single time, and it's just not necessary. I'm just going to tie it up to the frame. All right, now that all the 4 bolts are out, you can go ahead and just get this out of the way. Like I said, I'm going to tie it up to the frame. Now we can come up here to the front drive shaft, and once again, it's the 12 millimeter 12 point. Now with these bolts on the front drive shaft, you're going to want to use either a regular wrench or preferably a ratcheting wrench, because as you get these further out, you'll find that your ratchet ends up getting stuck before the bolt actually comes all the way out. So just use a wrench to avoid that problem. Now to make getting to some of the bolts easier, what we'll do is we'll go up here, and you don't have to unlock both hubs, but just unlock one of them, and then you can spin the drive shaft around. And then go back up and lock it. And take more bolts out. And then just like the rear drive shaft, either give it a swift kick or a pry bar, or in my case, just the sheer amount of force I had to use to break those bolts loose actually loosened up the drive shaft already. And then, so we can just actually let that hang right there if we want. Or just like the rear, you can pull it off with the differential too, but that's way more work than necessary. Next, we can unhook our electrical connectors. And if you have a manual shift transfer case, it'll be a little bit different. You'll have a single plug coming up here, and that is the sensor that all it really does is just turn your lights on your dash for when you're in four-wheel drive. But there'll be one here, and then one right there on the motor itself. And on this top one here, there is a little red tab thing that needs to come towards the driver's side of the truck. And then once you get that red tab slid over, you can just get your thumb up in there and pull that one off. And then this one here doesn't have a tab on it. You just push in right there on that little piece. Now up here by the first electrical connector we took off is the vent hose. Just grab a hold of that and pull it off the nipple. Alright, now we can take the 6 bolts out that hold the transfer case to the extension housing of the transmission. There's one there, one down here. You can kind of see it through there, maybe, if the lighting's right, which it's not, but it's kind of sort of on the bottom. And then there's another one up top right here. And then from this side, oh, I just cut my knee on rust. Look at that beautiful bodywork. Yep, that's spray foam. So there's one here, and then you can kind of see it right there. And then another one, I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to show it to you. It's up top here, you can feel it. I've actually got the wrench on it right now. Most of these, it's actually easiest just to use a regular box end wrench and just flip it around different ways to get them all broke loose. This one right here, I've found that an extension with grab an extension with a swivel on the end of it, and you can actually get that up in there and break it loose pretty easy. There you can see the setup I got. Obviously this is a lot easier with the exhaust out of the way, but it's definitely still doable with the exhaust there. But like I said, open end wrench, or box end wrench, I mean, is going to be the best way to get most of them broke loose. And if you're lucky like I've been, they all broke loose pretty easily. And I've already got them broke loose, so I'm going to go ahead and thread those out by hand. Alright, now we can go ahead and pull the transfer case out. And hopefully all of my riggings here is good. Be aware that might happen. So maybe have some towels ready like I didn't. Alright, and we're free. So now, if you have a stock height truck and a Harbor Freight transmission jack, you'll find that there is absolutely no way that you're going to get it out from underneath the frame rails while still on the jack. And since I don't feel like taking it off the jack underneath the truck and then sliding the new one underneath there and trying to get it up on the jack under the truck, I'm just going to lift the truck up with a regular floor jack and then slide it out. Should be able to clear that. Oh, and safety second or third or something. I'm not actually going to set it down on that. That's just going to catch it in case the jack fails, which it probably will because it's old. Alright, now that the transfer case is out of the truck and everything, there's a little hole right there that is going to drip fluid for a while. I don't know exactly how much is going to drip out at this exact point in time, but I'm going to find out tomorrow because I'm at a point to where I'm done working for the night. I just got this dripping down into a pan. Tomorrow morning I'm going to just measure how much came out and just keep that set aside to refill the transmission with tomorrow. It's actually pretty stable on here besides wanting to go that way. But that's just because, like I said, this side is way heavier than this side over here. So I'm going to see if I can blow a testicle out here or something. Trying to get this thing off of here. Remember, always lift with your back, not your legs. Or something like that. And hopefully I can get this one lined up in the same spot. Not quite. Yep, she'll hold. It's not going anywhere. Alright, now we'll get this slid back underneath the truck. Now we can hopefully gently lower the truck down to this. But my jack is complete junk. So we'll see how well this works. Come on. You know what? It's going down slowly, so I'm just going to let it go like that. So eventually that little hole will stop leaking. It's been about, I don't know, probably 16 hours. It's the next afternoon now. Yeah, I work slow. I don't care. So anyway, it'll stop leaking eventually, and that's when it makes it a lot easier to come down here and work on stuff without having fluid dripping all over you. Obviously, you want to make sure your gasket surfaces or your mating surfaces are cleaned up. Got all the old crap off of them. And I'm actually going to do a little trick here. You know, it has a paper gasket that goes in there, and there's a part number if you want it. Those things are always a pain to get cleaned up later on if you ever have to remove this transfer case again. So what I'm actually going to do is put a real thin layer of transmission fluid or oil, whatever, over the mating surface here. And you can do that over here as well. And what that does is that keeps that paper gasket from really getting completely stuck to this. So if in the future you have to remove the transfer case again, you should be able to reuse the gasket because it'll just stay there, or if you decide not to reuse it, it'll at least come off significantly easier. Sometimes that fluid will actually help hold the gasket in place, but just to be sure it doesn't move on us, just do that for the time being. Now we can go ahead and get our transfer case put back up to the transmission. And this whole process here is exactly why I opted to use a transmission jack. Because trying to do this, holding this heavy thing above your head, really, really sucks. Oh, there we go. There she moved. Actually, I might be able to start pulling it in with a bolt. Maybe. Oh, yeah. Sweet. Sometimes that alignment dowel up there is a little bit difficult to get everything slid over, especially if there's any corrosion in the hole. Alright, so now I'm just going to use the bolts to kind of pull the transfer case up to where it needs to go. And obviously, go gently with this. If it starts binding up, stop. Don't be stupid and just keep cranking on it. And you'll feel a little bit of resistance, which is normal, but it should be going smoothly. That's just kind of snug. Don't want to get crazy on it yet. Now we'll go ahead and snug up the other 5 bolts, just snug, not super tight yet. So now that I've got it up there with one bolt kind of snug, especially being the top one, obviously it's not going to be going anywhere, so go ahead and get my riggings off of here, get the jack out of here, give me more room to work. And once you've got all 6 of them snugged up down there, hopefully in a somewhat cross pattern, you're going to torque them down to 37 foot-pounds, and good luck with that. There's like 2 of them in there that you can actually get a torque wrench on, so I just guess. If you want, you can probably actually get a torque on the 2 that you can get the torque wrench onto and get an idea how that feels, and then just kind of go from there with the rest of them. Just try to match that amount of force. Now we can get our vent hose put back on. You definitely don't want to forget that. It's also a good time to make sure that it's clear. You can blow in it or whatever, just make sure that it's not blocked off. Get our wires plugged in. Make sure you push your little red tab thinger over. Now we can go ahead and get our drive shafts put back on. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the rear so I stop smacking my head on it. There's a good possibility that you're going to have to put the transmission in neutral in order to get the holes lined up on the flange here. And if you're using a brand used one like me, the transfer case that is, I'm going to try to get it to where I'm using the holes that were used before. So we'll go ahead and get this snugged down real quick. Once you've got all 4 of those just kind of snugged up, go ahead and make sure you put the truck back in park, or if you have a manual, put it in first or reverse, whichever. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the front drive shaft bolts, and then I'm just going to torque all 8 of those bolts down at the same time. That's not creepy at all. Thing's just been sitting there watching me. And I don't appreciate that. So now we can go ahead and torque down the 4 bolts on each of the drive shafts. And the torque spec for the front is 82 foot-pounds and the rear is 76. I don't have a freaking clue as to why they're different, because they're the exact same bolts going into pretty much the exact same flange, and they do the exact same thing. So your guess is as good as mine on that one. And since you can't get a torque wrench in there. You almost can, but mine I can't. So we're just gonna guess on those. We can get these though. And make sure you do it in a cross pattern, like always. Like with everything. And then go back and check them one more time. Alright, good to go. So since we already got a pretty good feel of what kind of force we need on the other side, or on the rear drive shaft, can just do it this way and guess. Sometimes you get lucky and your elbow will crack at the right torque, and that kind of acts like a torque wrench. Click. Yep, it's torqued. As rusty as these are, I'm really not too worried about them coming out, so. We also, in this part of the world, they salt the ever-living crap out of the roads, which completely eliminates the need for Loctite. You just use Mother Nature's Loctite. And everything just gets rust welded together. It's great. Next, we're going to see how much fluid drained out of that little hole. And to do that, we just go to the kitchen and get our nicest measuring cup. And just dump it in and see how much it is. So between that and how much dribbled out on the floor, I'm going to call that a quart. And obviously I'm not reusing that with all the crap that's in there. I'm not that cheap. So we'll go ahead and put that quart back into the transmission where it belongs. A new one, obviously. I always like to shake up oil bottles, make sure all the additives and stuff are dispersed evenly through it and not settled out on the bottom, especially considering this has been sitting on my shelf for several years probably. And whoever designed a transmission dipstick and using that for the filler clearly didn't have to work on it themselves. So now we can go ahead and make sure our fluid level's good in here. I'm not actually sure if there's any in this one at all at the current point in time. But an important thing to note is always make sure you remove your fill plug first, because if you can't get that out and you remove the drain plug, well, now you're screwed because you can't get fluid back in it. So the plugs on these are a 10 millimeter Allen. And don't mind that. That's a custom job. Some people pay extra for custom. Oh yeah. Now there appears to be fluid in it, but I don't remember the condition. So yeah, it's getting drained. Yeah, that's not the greatest looking. Now we can go ahead and put our drain plug back in. And don't go crazy on the torque on this. It doesn't need to be super tight. You can kind of look at the rust marks and see about where it was, or just, you know, snug. That feels about right. because you don't want it to end up like that one. That works, but definitely not an ideal situation. And now just stick your hose in there with a pump, preferably, that, you know, supposedly fits gallon-sized containers too, but doesn't, but whatever. Go ahead and pump that full until it starts running out up there, and then go ahead and plug it up. Also, I feel like it's important to note right now, make sure you're using Dexmerc, not Merc V, Merc 5, whatever you want to call it. I've heard of too many cases of transfer cases exploding from using the Merc V, and a buddy of mine that actually helps me work out here in the shop sometimes, he is actually a victim of that. Transfer case exploded on him doing about 80 miles an hour down the interstate. Apparently it sounded like a shotgun going off inside the truck. So make sure you're using the right type of fluid. Ford also sells, I guess they call it a transfer case fluid now, which from my understanding is literally just the old Dexmerc. All right, then you just keep pumping it until you start seeing fluid run out of your fill plug here and make a mess everywhere. Then we can go ahead and install our fill plug, which we've established that mine is a highly customized piece of art. And then what I like to do is take some brake cleaner and spray all that excess off, so that way we can identify if there's a leak later on. And at this point, the job is really done. Oh, one more thing. Don't forget to unlock your hubs. Not super critical, but with today's fuel prices, you'll save some fuel and also a little bit of wear and tear on your front axle and your transfer case. So that's it for the job. Hope you all enjoy, and hopefully you get some help out of it. So thanks for watching.